Hi, I got a tip for you today on fishing weed beds. The outside edges of weed beds tend to be the places where deep water fish really make their first contact with moving into the shallows to feed. This isn't true in freshwater, of course, for largemouth bass, smallmouth bass, pike, walleyes, even muskies. But it also is the same for a lot of saltwater fish, including redfish. As you can see in this very shallow weed bed, there's a lot of turns and points, little pockets, things that will attract the fish when they move up from the deep open water into the shallow water weeds where the food is. And while this bed right here is certainly worth fishing with parallel casts made to the weed bed, it's indicative of what deep weed beds are like that you can't really see with the naked eye. Sometimes deep weed beds will be in 10, 12, 15, even 20 feet of water in very clear northern lakes. And those weed beds, you've got to probe with either sonar, plastic baits like plastic worms and jigs. An exposed hook jig, you can feel these edges, and you're going to get hung up with the jig. But if you keep making deeper casts with probing casts along the outside edges, and eventually the jig comes back not fouled with any weeds. That's where you know the edge is. You've got to mark that maybe with floating markers, and work the points and turns in those outside deep weed beds, and those are often the contact points and the ambush points for where bass, pike, walleyes, other predators are found. Just make sure you work those outside weed edges. This shallow weed bed, it's easy to see it, and it's no problem keeping the lure in a productive zone, the outside edge, parallel cast to the weed beds. But in deeper weeds, you've got to do it with subsurface lures. Jig works real well, Texas rig plastic worm, even crankbait sometimes. But keeping that lure on the edges of the weeds, even deep ones down 15, 18, 20 feet, that's the most important thing. Parallel weed casts, work the edges.